What's a scary fact you know about the ocean? If you pass a certain level underwater, you can no longer float to the surface. You have to use all your strength to swim back up, which can use up too much oxygen and suffocate. 40 feet I think, then you just sink. The Corrie Wrekin Maelstrom in Scotland is a permanent whirlpool that is the third strongest in the world. It can produce 15 feet high standing waves. It's also the name of my favorite scotch. At its deepest, Challenger deep in the Mariana Trench, you could fit Mt. Everest and still have close to 10,000 feet of water between it and the surface. Bull sharks live in the ocean and rivers. That's a scary fact. Another thing about bull sharks, a human male has a testosterone level between 50 and 40. Bull sharks exceed over 900 and have the highest of any animal in the animal kingdom. The ocean at night is probably the scariest thing I can think of. It's pitch black. You can't see anything, but most all of it can see you. In fact, there's plenty of predators that prefer to do their hunting at night. That's scary to me and why I don't swim at night, among other things. The concept of shark spotters is common where I live. People stand at a vantage point above popular beaches and look for sharks in the water to help ensure the safety of beachgoers. However, underwater sensors have shown us, well, shark biologists, that way more sharks swim very close to the beach than shark spotters can see. People really have no idea how many sharks they've probably encountered. That being said, very few sharks are actually dangerous to humans. The fact that the famous picture of the blob fish is not actually what a blobfish looks like. When scientists first found them, they did not know that the blobfish is not as resilient as other deep sea creatures, and that particular blobfish was pulled to the surface too quickly, and had its skin and flesh torn off from the immense force of rapid decompression. The blobfish in that photo has its skin torn off. What's even worse is that companies have made t-shirts and even squishies entirely based off of this photo. It still chills me to this day. Then it could be a beautiful fish, but we're seeing something ugly and scary because its skin is torn off. Imagine a human without skin scary. Either coral reefs are all but dead or that they found plastic trash waste in the Marianas Trench. We have so thoroughly fricked this planet, and the fever it's developing to kill off the virus that is us is going to destroy so much more life along the way. The real problem is the acidification of the ocean as it continues to absorb pollution. Also, the ceasing of the currents due to a lack of temperature gradient will also doom the oceans. So lots of fun ways the ocean is dying. There is this type of jellyfish in the Philippines that touches you and kills you. Yearly it kills around 500 people. When its poison gets on your bloodstream, it makes your heart stops. It doesn't attack you, moves by pure instinct, and it's hard to notice if you are swimming, so people touch it by accident. There's untold amounts of methane trapped in ice crystals at the bottom of the ocean. If the ocean were to warm to the point that these methane clathrates hydrates melt, it would be very bad. With permafrost already starting to melt, and how extra stupid humanity has been lately, I'd expect it's only a matter of time. So the ocean is a giant carbon sink for our planet, just like soil. The corals are bleaching because the capacity of this carbon sink is being used up and causing acidification of the water. Carbon emissions are caused by humans, which cause exponentially more humans, which cause exponentially more carbon emissions. Our current trajectory is an ever steepening slope. What happens to this slope when we lose a carbon sink that makes up literally 70% of the planet? The slope becomes a vertical wall. Humanity is heading for a figurative wall. I can't imagine correcting our situation once we hit that wall. Damage would be so sudden and far-reaching all at once. Source: my degree in environmental science and working on bachelor's in marine bio. Yeah, honestly, I don't exactly blame people for giving in to their biological urge to procreate, but it seems extremely short-sighted and cruel. Every one of those kids is gonna be on board as we hit the wall. We actually have no idea what's down there in the depths, like, no idea whatsoever. It's so vast and deep, and imagine the creatures that may be down there. Sharks big as a mother. Highly unlikely. Deep sea gigantism, which is the tendency of invertebrates to reach massive sizes, i.e. crabs, isopods, squid, isn't really found in vertebrates like sharks. The food requirements to support an absolutely massive shark are high, and there just isn't a reliable enough source of food in the deep ocean these days. Typically these days the largest animals we have on Earth are herbivores because it is a more efficient food source to support massive body sizes. The deep ocean is vast and deep, but it's a desert. Very limited resources and only highly adapted animals can survive. So much of the ocean is still left undiscovered. The ocean covers such a massive part of the world we live in, and to this day everything is still left undiscovered. NASA for some reason stopped mapping the ocean. In my opinion, they found something that could freak us really quick and nope the frick out of there. There was a fossil of a squid beak the size of the kraken, and it's possible there's still live deep sea kraken like giant squid. Most of the oxygen in our atmosphere comes from single cooled bacteria in the ocean. A massive chunk of that comes from a single species of bacteria. The number of viral particles that target these organisms is vastly larger than the number of bacteria themselves. If a breakthrough marine virus, like an oceanic version of COVID, popped up, we could lose the majority of our oxygenic bacteria in the blink of a geological eye. This is not completely correct. About half the oxygen produced each year is produced in the ocean. But this oxygen primarily remains in the ocean as there is a relatively small area for oxygen to cross into the atmosphere from the ocean. But this oxygen is actually produced by phytoplankton, which includes microscopic algae and cyanobacteria. Microscopic algae are actually eukaryotic, not prokaryotic bacteria. But you are correct, there is an absolutely massive amount of marine viruses, some of them getting very complex. However, it is highly unlikely to have a breakthrough virus because unlike humans, bacteria can easily exchange genetic material, so if a single bacteria develops an immunity to a virus, it can relatively easily share it with other bacteria, thus increasing resistance in the population. This sort of mechanism is why there is fear around antibiotic-resistant bacteria. It's big. Really big. I'm not talking walk down to the chemist's big. That's peanuts compared to the ocean. See that giant ship? That thing will get thrown around like a toy boat in a bathtub. If you're really unlucky, it'll sink. If the Chicxulub type asteroid lands in the Pacific Ocean at any time, it would create the largest tsunami known. To give you an idea, the impact would have registered a 13 on the Richter magnitude scale. I wonder how big the wave would be. We have only explored a small amount of the ocean. I think like 5% is what we explored. So we don't even know what other creatures live down there. Well, calling them creatures may not be wrong, but it sounds much scarier than it actually is. Most of that unexplored ocean is just tons of water with an extremely low chance of there being some species that has a significant different than others. Just don't frick with the ocean. We don't know dong about the planet we're on. It's 70% water, and realistically we have little to no hard understanding or idea what is actually there or goes on. There was almost a 40-foot shark-like being who was sighted by hundreds of people throughout the years on every Friday during the early 90s. The shark always stopped near the shrine on Fridays. Also, the dolphins are friendly with humans because they go to the depths of ocean where the mermaids are, and that's why we seem similar to them. You're crazy, EMI. Fish frickin' it. But seriously, the ocean is genuinely terrifying. Nothing on Earth has the raw destructive power. Our world and society would be very different if those brave souls didn't traverse oceans to explore the world, then form trade routes. When I was younger, we had a boat that we would do channel trips in UK to France. And one time we got caught in a storm. There were warnings, but it rolled in faster than anyone expected. It's the first time I've seen sheet lightning, literally the sky exploding and a web of electricity blanketing the sky as far as the eye can see. And we had 12 featuring water swells, so our 4-berth motorboat was being tossed around like crazy. We couldn't anchor because the risk of drag causing the anchor to yank upwards and hit the bottom of the boat was very real. Being a kid, and therefore immortal, I was on deck laying down watching the sky as all this unfolded. Still to this day the most awe-inspiring thing I've ever experienced. And that was just the sea, let alone an ocean. We haven't explored the ocean in full. We've been to the moon, but there's still huge portions of the ocean we haven't explored, so it's very possible that there could be a crap ton of ocean life we don't know about. See people like in that Disney film. That the ocean conveyor circulation, also known as Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation AMOC, is what keeps northeastern North America and Europe as warm as it is. It's weakening significantly, and it could be the poster child for non-linear effects of climate change. Please, sharks aren't scary, we are. Not a fact, but when I lived in Perth a few years ago, I lived near a relatively popular surfing beach where me and my wife surfed on the regular. Quite often we would get home from surfing and see on a shark spotting page that a shark the size of a car was spotted 100 meters or less out from where we were surfing 10 minutes ago. Not sure how we kept going back, I'm hindsight. What's scary is all the stuff we don't know about the ocean. There is a reason for why it's hard to learn about the ocean and the ocean floor. One thing is simply visibility. You can't look through a water column as you can look through a column of air with the same volume and shape. By now it's comparatively easy to record images of the Earth's surface, and for vast areas we usually use satellite-based imagery. 0. If we need imagery with higher accuracies for different tasks, we need a higher GSD, which stands for ground sampling distance, which, on a side note, describes the distance between the centers of two consecutive pixels. An image where the distance between two pixel centers is 20 centimeters in the real world lets you interpret the content of the image better than with an image where the distance between those centers are 2m1. So on land, we can map the entire Earth with satellites and get imagery as we know it. RGB imagery that looks like something we could take with our phone when we're on a space rocket or airplane that flies very, very high. The signals we use for that are some kinds of light with different wavelengths for what we see as colors: red, green, blue. Mapping the Earth or other planets with satellites and optical methods isn't solved entirely, but the point is that it's very different from how we map ocean floors. While in the beginning, water depths were measured using lead lines. You'd lower a rope with a weight attached to one end into the water until it would hit the bottom of the sea, and by knowing the amount of rope that has been pulled, you'd more or less know the depth. 2. For a single point in the entire sea, you'd note that position by calculating it with a compass and, for example, a sextant. By today's means, that's inaccurate. Accuracy is a whole other rabbit hole that's worth exploring when it comes to surveying things, and B, it takes a ton of time. Skipping ahead a few hundreds of years, we have something called an echo sounder. We started off with single beam echo sounders, SBES. There is a device that can produce a sound signal, called ping, into the water column, and, hence the name echo sounder, can catch the echo of, hopefully, that signal. By calculating the transit time of our ping by knowing the speed of sound in water, for the sake of simplicity, around 1500 ms, we can predict the water depth at a given point. If we know, and we do, where we mount the SBES on our ship's hull and by connecting it to our GPS, or GNSS for global navigation satellite system, which takes, for example, the Russian GLONASS, the Chinese Beidou or the European Galileo satellite systems into account as well, we can automatically connect the water depth to specific reference systems so everyone can work with it. 3. Today, lots of smaller boats are equipped with SBES since the technology, over the years, got rather affordable. Due to its automated nature, SBES helped a lot with mapping the seafloor. However, we tend to get only a small point at a certain depth each time we ping, which is limiting, especially considering that the majority of land cover of Earth is, well, ocean. The problem with SBES is that if you have measured two lines, the line in between, C, is unknown. There might be a sharp, huge rock that might damage the ship's hull, so it's not as reliable as having a huge satellite image of everything that's down there. Skipping ahead again for some years, we can observe something called multi-beam echo sounders, which is like a SBES but sending out multiple pings at the same time. The pings are ordered like a fan and are called a swarf. There is the term Swarf Width, which can be calculated by the opening angle of your MBES and the estimated distance to the seafloor. You can picture the swarf like the open mouth of Pac-Man, starting at the center of Pac-Man himself while the open part pointing at the seafloor, or you could simply take a look at 4. It's an image, no text. This is basically state of the art. There are ideas of doing things with satellites and aerial methods like using LiDAR, light detection and ranging, comparable to what we do with the MBES but with optical systems instead of acoustical systems. So now we can identify and detect wide strips of the seafloor as ships travel along and can even switch frequencies of the pings to detect specific features that are being reflected by different kinds of targets. Simplified, higher frequencies don't penetrate as much as lower frequencies do, for example. There are still lots of limitations. When measuring in very deep areas, you have to consider not going too fast so you can catch the echo, which takes longer than in shallow waters. Also, due to traversing a water column that is multiple kilometers long, and especially knowing that ocean water isn't clean like distilled water, you suffer from quality loss due to, for example, refractions. It's also not cheap to hire a crew, get a ship and send people around the ocean to measure the seafloor, which, for most people in the private sector, isn't always too interesting. There are talks about seafloor mining, which comes with a financial incentive for private companies, which might lead to a better map of the seafloor, which might theoretically end up causing a mass extinction of animals and plants living at seafloors though. 5. This, however, is venturing into politics, which I don't like, so I'll leave it at that. This is an inconvenient truth and should be considered scary, but for reason people wish to deny it. The fact that the oceans are becoming less salty due to climate change. Desalinated. The warmth of our climate is climbing, causing fresh water to enter the oceans from melting glaciers and polar caps. When this happens, the ocean's currents change dramatically. These ocean currents drive our weather patterns, which had somewhat regulated to less dramatic weather patterns over thousands of years. Now, they are becoming more powerful, unpredictable and deadly. This does happen naturally over thousands of years, but since we've driven up global warming over the last 200 years, we're going to hit a tipping point. Our Earth will see a new ice age before it should. Please do correct me if I'm wrong, but this should scare people. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.